SteveO from Veterans Voices with Joe and SteveO. So this is episode 10. This is following SteveO's story. This is Joe's story. So this is Joe and I in Hawaii, and we're talking. Joe's sharing his life and how things happened and how we got where we are today.
Yeah, so this we recorded in January of 2020 at my house in Hawaii when SteveO came out to visit, and we were starting this podcast. We were able to record some raw footage, and part of that was his story, and this is my story of me, joining the Navy and my time through the Navy and retiring in 2018. So hope you enjoy it, and that's about it. So check us out.
So what about you?
How did I end up in the military?
Yeah.
So, how did I end up I went to Villanova. I went to Villanova for college. So I probably had a little bit of a different upbringing than SteveO, but I came from pretty wealthy parents in New Jersey. They were certainly like upper middle class type folks, and we had nice things. My dad was an engineer. We had a nice house. Parents took good care of us. Like all that good stuff. All that, the basis of like a good childhood. I definitely had that. And when I was in like 8th grade, my parents split up, and my dad then proceeded to inherit a big fund from his mother who passed away. And in like 18 months, he'd blown it all. So like college funds, all his money, he was jobless. He was living in this dump in Brunswick, New Jersey. And so that, in retrospect, is probably the best thing that's ever happened to me, right? Because then, through high school, living with my mom, who was a teacher, still, she kept the house for us, but she worked, and like we went to school, and there wasn't like a ton of extra money around. I went to college. I was able to go to college, and like I went to Villanova. Realized after my freshman year I wasn't going to be able to pay for it, so I was thinking about transferring and going to Rutgers in New Jersey, which is way cheaper. But a couple of my buddies who were in my engineering classes said, "Hey, like you should join NROTC. It's just like a track team." And I was like, "What?" Yeah. They're like, "Yeah, we just like work out a couple days a week, and then like one day a week we meet up and we wear our uniforms." I'm like, and they'll give me a scholarship. They're like, full scholarship. They'll give you full scholarship. I was like, all right, like sign me up for that. So I joined the Navy because my buddies told me it was just like a track team. I'm not making that up. Like I make decisions that poorly in my life, but it turned out to be a great thing. I ended up getting an engineering degree from Villanova. After 5 arduous years, I got my BS in engineering, and then went out to Navy dive school to become a Navy diver. Went through and did tours on ships throughout my career. About right in the beginning of 2001, right at essentially the end of 2000, I decided I was going to transition from being a Navy diver to being a surface warfare officer, and then 9/11 happened and we went to war for the next 17 years. So I stayed in until I was a commander, and then I retired in the summer of 2018. So now I am a retired Navy commander living in Hawaii, and I'm recording a podcast. We'll talk about a lot of things in this podcast, and we'll talk about like trauma and the different types of trauma that people suffer, whether it's physical or emotional or mental. So for anybody who's had parents that have gotten divorced, like there's some kind of trauma associated with that. But overall, like it wasn't terrible. Like the thing that I enjoyed the most about my parents' divorce was that when they separated from each other, they stopped fighting. So that was actually way better.
Well, that's what and you hear that from people who are mature. But when you're a kid, it happens. It's like, wow, what the fuck happened? What's that all about? Because you're not like on the inside of it. I mean, unless you are. But like with my dad suffered from PTSD. Like they didn't call it that. I think he was like shell-shocked.
Oh yeah, my dad also suffers from PTSD. Yeah. And I didn't recognize PTSD in my dad until we were in like the 2013, 2014 part of the wars that, you know, we've obviously been fighting in the Middle East, and like once I saw the changes in my buddies from when they joined with me in the late 90s, early 2000s, to what their personalities were like in, you know, 2010 and 2011 and 2012, like, I'm like, okay, like these guys, and they're still active, right, they're still active duty guys. These guys are lieutenant commanders and commanders, and it's like they have PTSD from the things that they have done in this endless war that we've been in the Middle East.
Well, and it gives you some perspective, because you get to experience it through your relationships and from what you see, like in your, you know,
right. So then once I saw that in the guys I served with, I could see it in my dad too.
Right.
I'm like, oh, like that, like so many things are becoming clear.
Right, it makes sense. Well, so when I was a little kid, we didn't understand that, because they didn't give like you know, my dad was in the forgotten war. Well, it really was forgotten, because people didn't want to hear it. Like, he wasn't going, like, he never bitched about it. Like, today, everybody, I mean, and rightly so, like, they're getting a lot of attention, and that's some of the stuff that we're doing, why we're doing it.
Well, not everybody bitches about it, but...
Well, but you know what I mean. Like, I just mean that there's a, not that they're on a soapbox. I don't mean like they're bitching, they're like, they have an outlet to be able to express it. But they didn't in those days. People didn't want to fucking hear it. And especially like, I get it, like today, like I think my dad was like, you know, he was a young guy, a kid during World War II. He saw the parades and everything, and he was living in like, my dad was, you know, had been kind of given up. He grew up in an orphanage. I think he wanted like the structure of the military, but he wanted to be something. He wanted to be a hero. And then he went to that war, and it fucked him up. And then so he spent you know, seven kids, and you know, like living like no jobs, living in like a different state every year, because he just couldn't function. Like he I think he was probably, this life was just crushing down on him, and he had all this stuff. He couldn't sleep. He was like on eggshells all the time. He was just, you know, but he never like harmed us, or he was never a threat. Like, but he was just like, you could tell like something was going on, and he just couldn't deal with life. So like, what were we gonna do? It's like, what kind of a role model is that?
Yeah.
You know, today, like when like you talked about, like you didn't realize like your dad's, like it didn't really like connect until like 2012 or 13 or whatever, like when everybody you knew was like in a war, or you know, you saw a lot of these people who were your friends who were going through these things, or your acquaintances. I had that kind of a similar experience with my dad, but it was before 9/11. And in fact, it trickled into after 9/11, because that really, you know, that opened a lot of people's eyes. I really think that was the catalyst for, and then the wars that started was why veterans are getting so much support. And so I don't want to give the wrong impression and be like callous and say, like, people are bitching. I don't mean it like that. What I mean is that they have a voice now. They have people who listen to them.
So you know, I was already in the military on September 11th, but like the reception that 9/11 is the Pearl Harbor of my generation, right? It is the thing that the country rallied around.
Yeah.
And as fucked up as our response to it was with invading Iraq and all that kind of stuff, and creating the additional trauma that we've created by doing that, it is the you know, the thing that everybody rallies around. It's the day that everyone remembers. I mean, fuck, dude. I can, you know, I'll tell a story. I went to Fleet Week in the summer of 2003 in New York City. We took these 2 patrol boats down from Newport, and we sailed from Newport, Rhode Island, in these 2 patrol boats down to New York City for Fleet Week for a 4-day Memorial Day celebration. And we did a big, huge party at the Navy League, like right at the south end of Central Park, on the 8th floor of this building overlooking the park, just everything's on the house, everybody's drinking. Should have been my whites. I went out 3 or 4 nights, I can't remember, I think it was 3 nights in my whites that 4-day weekend, and I destroyed 3 pairs of whites each night, like when I couldn't recover the uniform, right? It was just completely destroyed after nights out drinking in New York City. My wife came into town, I invited my friends out, we were going, it was essentially like me in my uniform, one other Navy guy, a bunch of random civilians that I was already friends with, going into bars and then having people in New York City buy us so many drinks.
Oh, out of admiration.
That we could not consume all of the alcohol that we were being given in the bars. There were, every time you get a free drink, there'd be an upside down shot glass on the bar, and there were, no one should be giving us alcohol, and there's 20 inverted shot glasses on the bar for the drinks that we are owed, that people have already paid for and left. It was sometimes you got to do your duty.
But that's probably how it was with World War II.
Right, so that was the same thing at the end of World War II.
Right,
We staggered, wasted, out of a bar, onto the streets of New York to run into a New York City police officer who then proceeded to get 2 police cars to drive us to another bar so that we could continue drinking. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable, the reception that New York City gave service members.
Right, so assistance program. So when you went, explain what you went through. So when you decided you were going to retire.
Yeah, so I decided I was going to retire, and you are required to go through retirement TAPS. And TAPS is the Transition Assistance Program. So you have, like, if you do your initial enlistment, you get out after 4 or 5 years, you do a TAP transition course. If you're retiring, they do an RTAP course. People can go to either one, but it's tailored a little bit different way because they have different things they can talk about the people that are retiring or just are separating. And then there's like an executive TAP.
Right, for senior officers.
For senior officers. I went to that too. There's a ruling course, which is like another. It's fascinating. It's not really fascinating. So it's like a headhunter. It's like a headhunter.
So what do they offer? Oh, right. So the contractors come in.
Yeah, it's like some kind of contract headhunter. I was and like the senior officers were like rave about it. I was like, that was all like bullshit, and we just spent 3 days, and that was bullshit.
Right, because because the government paid a contractor to come in and look for people.
Yeah, it's like ridiculous. It was created by some supply officer.
Yeah.
Some supply corps admiral.
Right.
We appreciate his example that he can set with like money making. The thing I got out of the ruling course was that I should probably try to win that contract and give the ruling course. Like that's what I took away from that. Is like I should go steal that contract.
What did you find? Because there was everything. They were teaching you how to write resumes. They're teaching you how to look for jobs. They're teaching you, they're telling you, giving you instructions on how to make sure that your medical records are proper.
Right. So you spend because everything takes a week and everything's PowerPoint centric. You go to this course. They tell you have to wear civilian clothes.
Because you have to pretend like you're civilian.
You have to dress as if you're going for like a civilian job in the region that you're going to. So that's not necessarily a bad thing because, I mean, some people maybe they only wore their uniform for 20 years. Some people like really identify with that. If you were the guy who really identified with the military and that was everything you wanted to do, and it comes to an end for you because it comes to an end for every single person. Like, every person is going to leave the military, like, their military service will end. They will either retire, resign, or die. Those are the only ways out of the military.
Hopefully not in that order.
There's a small group that get less of a transition program, but they are carted off to the brig, and they get Leavenworth. And I don't know exactly what that transition program is like.
That's a different career path.
That's a different path, right?
Right, so
in this one, they try to cover all of the stuff so that you can go out. I think there's like a fear that they don't want to release veterans into the wilderness and we're not productive members of society. I would say if you're a member of the military right now and you're like listening to this and you're thinking about like blowing off that course and not.
Yeah, tragic mistake.
And yeah, don't do that. Like definitely go, definitely like take some notes, at least like do things like get your resume done. Figure out, so I don't know if you're aware of this if you're in the military, but you get a paycheck twice a month. So when you leave the military, that paycheck stops. It's true.
It's a bad thing.
And so if you don't have any other money and you don't have any plans to make any money, that's how you become homeless. So you should think about that.
Right,
like you should think about that before you just leave the military.
But remember, today there are programs with the VA if you become homeless because you didn't do what Joe just said. Because you forgot to go to the TAP class.
Yeah, you forgot to go to TAP, now you're homeless. So we have a program for that too.
So our goal is for you not to do that before. But in those days they didn't really do anything. Like they didn't do what they do with you guys. They have somebody from the hospital come over and like give you. I'm sure with the officers they gave them like personal time to go over their records and they encourage you to go and get your physical, because the one thing you want to be sure of is that if you don't have it in your records, it never happens. And then it's a bitch to try to convince anybody that you had a thing.
So we should probably talk about that for.
Yeah, let's do that.
So let's talk about that for a minute. Okay, so if it's not in your record, it never happened, and that's really a true thing, which is why it's really I think it's really important. Other people have told me it's really important, but as you're getting out of the military, you need to get a hold of as much of or all of your medical records and get copies of them, and then get that submitted to the VA before you're out. Because what seems to be a recurring theme with veterans that we talk to is that guys that have left shortly after they leave the service or right as they're leaving the service, they get all their medical records submitted and all of they file for all of the different injuries that they've sustained throughout their military career, and then it's all service connected. All of it happened. You were serving, right? So in my case, I was serving for 22 years. At the end of those 22 years, I got a copy of my record, like as I was walking out the door, and I took it to the DAV.
Disabled American Veterans.
I took it to the DAV, signed the power of attorney to them, and then they reviewed my medical record and submitted for my disability claim.
Right. Everything in there that could be an issue, they submitted
every
a claim for.
Single thing, and that was a really good way to do it. And nobody tells you to do that. So I'm telling you that from my experience, that worked really well for me. You find problems when even if you leave the military with what you think is a copy of your record, maybe it's missing pages or whatever, you have a CD or you have a thumb drive that you have it on, or you just have a stack of paper. Nobody has a stack of paper anymore though. And then you wait 2 or 3 years and then you go back, then you're in this situation with the VA where they're saying, well, how do we know that this injury is from when you were in the service and not from something you've done since you've left, right? What happened in those gap years? And say it's like a blown out ACL, right? And you have that in your record, and they're like, okay, your ACL was blown out, we are going to give you some disability for that blown out ACL. But you didn't submit for 2 or 3 or 5 years, and in the meantime, your back, you develop lower back pain or something like that. Right. Now you go back and try to get the back pain diagnosed, and the VA says, well, this never showed up in your record, so this is not service connected. You don't want to hear the words not service connected.
Well, and right. So in my experience, so my personal experience was, even though I didn't have that same transition assistance that you have, the one thing that I did have is that the injuries that I sustained that were recorded, they were fairly substantial. So, and they were things that became exponential. So I had like a back injury. Over 30 years, my back injury became hip injury, became knee injury, because all of those things become a domino effect. So they will determine, or they can decide that, well, yeah, and a board does that, well, it's reasonable that this ailment goes back to the root cause, which was the original injury. That happens, but you shouldn't be waiting 30 years to substantiate that. I was fortunate that the things that were, the problems that I had were documented, because I actually went to the doctor, but I can't tell you how many people that I know who said, today, who are messed up, and clearly messed up from their military time. And they go, I never went to the doctor.
Yeah.
You go, well, how can that be? Well, I can tell you from experience that the culture today, like what Joe served in, is completely different, and it's almost antithetical to what it was in the I call it the old days, but pre 9/11 days, and maybe even before that. But a lot of guys didn't go for mental illness, for PTSD. Like everybody,
yeah. There was a big stigma. There probably still is a stigma somewhat with mental illness in the military. I think we do a better job of it. I mean, I've been to counseling and coaching and I really enjoyed it. I find it to be valuable and useful, and it makes you, when you're serving, it makes you better at your job and a better leader and all that good stuff.
Well, but you get the young Marine who will go, there's nothing wrong with me,
yeah.
And I don't need to go to the doctor. And I will tell them today and yesterday, brother, I'm glad that you're so strong and capable, but you need to go to the doctor and you need to get that stuff documented, because you don't want to be waiting 30 years later and you're all fucked up, and then you go, I can't even, they don't believe me.
Yeah, absolutely. I met with this Army Lieutenant Colonel, and she was a lawyer, and she said that based on all the cases that she's seen, if you're just a regular infantryman in the Army, basically walking around with a pack, not even in combat, you're just marching, walking around with a pack, doing exercises,
you're getting
training. She's basically every single person that does that for 7 years, they're 100% disabled by the end of their first 7 years in the military.
Right.
Because you're walking, your knees are fucked up, your ankles are fucked up, your hips are fucked up, right? You're sleeping in some god awful place.
Well, and that's what's kind of strange about it all, is that you look at people, and then you look at people and you go, there's nothing fucking wrong with that guy. Do you live in that guy's body?
Yeah.
Because, I can tell you, I don't take, so...
All of his suffering's on the inside. It's all on the inside.
Well, it's much worse now after this shit. I'm not sure that this is going to work out, Joe.
What are you talking about? I think we're doing great.
See, and that's part of the other issue, is that, probably the biggest challenge that the VA has with disabled vets is, or all vets, not just guys who are considered officially service connected, is how do they deal with pain, and how do they and now there's such a big stigma with narcotics, and rightly so. Now they're looking at the alternatives, right? Because most guys they either take the drugs or they
suffer,
or they self-medicate.
Self-medicate.
Right.
They're the good ones. The horn rim. I get the horn rim.
So the one thing that I would say that's the most important thing that a veteran can do is to advocate for yourself. So if you need something, so go to your primary care doc that they gave you, and then you tell him that you need it. And then if he tells you no, you tell him you need it. And if he tells you no, you go to patient affairs and you say, I need it. You don't take no for an answer. If the whole idea in my mind, I know that this isn't what Congress decided that Veterans' Choice was, but Veterans' Choice to me is my choice. Everybody, when you're going for benefits, when you're first getting your first look, or any new look, that you get get an advocate. Unless you're an attorney and this is your specialty,
Get an advocate.
you get an advocate.
It's free.
And yeah, so think about, so there's a lot of them out there. DAV, VFW, like Veterans of Foreign Wars, all these, there's a lot of them. That the American Legion,
Order of the Purple Heart,
there's a gazillion of them.
American Legion.
But when I went to the VA the first time, and my dad told me this, my dad was a disabled vet, and he said, Steve, go to I'm a big advocate of the disabled American vets. And the reason is because if they weren't effective at their job at advocating for you and being your representative and a responsible one, they wouldn't have an office on the VA property. There's a reason why they have that, because they become a bridge to you. It's easier for the VA to talk to them because they understand all the language than to be talking to somebody who's going, but I fucked up, but I fucked up, but I fucked up.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because you don't know how to. Because we don't know how to navigate.
Right.
So that's how we'll introduce our first guest. After an hour listening to this guy, you'll be like, man, I'm glad that's not me.
Yeah. Well, that's the therapy here. That's your mental illness therapy. So, all right. So, okay, aloha, guys. And we'll see you next time.